Recording is in progress. I always wonder who the voice is of those things. It's not me. But anyway, I am Jen Jakovsky. So nice to meet you if I haven't met you. I am the current chapter president of the New York City chapter of ATD. We are the hosts of this regional webinar this evening. We are so thrilled to have a nice group here tonight. As I think David had already said, feel free to put not only your name and the chapter or area you're representing, but your LinkedIn profile so we can start connecting to one another. That would be wonderful. It's always good to get connected. So I want to just give you a quick intro as the host, and then I'll turn it over to David, who is our moderator. So you're not going to hear too much from me. Hello, Kim. So why are we here tonight? You can advance the slide, please, Allie. And don't worry, we don't have a lot of slides. So TD professionals, as I'm sure you know, play many roles, ranging from specialists such as trainers, instructional designers, coaches, consultants, organizational development professionals to generalists who use a broad spectrum of practices to achieve organizational goals. So today, TD professionals serve in organizations and as consultants, and they're the leading agents of change and transformation in our organizations. So we can pat ourselves on the back a little bit. So as TD professionals, we work to align learning with new directions and help firms manage the human elements of change. We also create talent development strategy that aligns with the organization's business strategy. So I'm super excited tonight to have gathered together such a diverse panel to be able to touch upon some of the many areas of talent development. So before you meet them, I briefly wanted to touch on the ATD talent development capability model, which you may have heard of. So by a show of hands, either live or emojis, or who has heard of the ATD capability model? Yes, yes, yes. So very, very quick overview. It's comprised of 3 domains, as you see on the slides, 23 capabilities, 189 knowledge and skill statements. There's a self-assessment you can take on the td.org website that measures your skills and knowledge in each of these 3 domains. You can use it to build a learning plan from ATD's resources that will help close knowledge and skill gaps to prepare you for the next step in your career, whether it be a new role, a certification, or even long-term development. So in our chapter in New York City, we've decided this year to anchor all of our programming with these themes. So tonight, what you'll see, hopefully seamlessly, is that we are segmenting our questions for our panelists into these 3 buckets, these 3 categories. So that's it for my education on the capability model. For more info, please see td.org. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to David so he can introduce himself and we can get into the good stuff.
All right, thank you so much, Jen, and hello everybody. So good to have you with us and great to have our panel here too. I am David Marks, and when I am not hanging out on ATD webinars, I am manager of instruction for General Assembly, specifically for our enterprise division in North America. And as moderator this evening, I'm really looking forward to bringing out a lot of great insights from our panel and potentially also from some of you. And the goal here is to focus on some questions that we've had our panelists prepare for, since we think they're important or interesting. And then also to stay open to opportunities where we can let the conversation go in directions that seem to be interesting to the group as a whole. So a little balance of some structure and some flexibility, and let's see where that takes us. I'm definitely excited to find out. When we have our panel introduce themselves, we're going to find out about who they are, what their role is, but I also will be asking each of them a specific question related to their background, so we can already start to dig into the topic even as part of the introductions. So we're going to start off with Alexis, and our question for you, Alexis, to get us going is, how have you seen LinkedIn impact the world, and more specifically, the TD community?
Sure, thank you, and thanks for having me. My name is Alexis King. I am a certified professional in talent development, and I work for LinkedIn, specifically in our e-learning arm called LinkedIn Learning. Some of you may be very familiar with it. And I would say, what LinkedIn has done to impact the world is, I could just tell you about our vision. LinkedIn's vision is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. And we do this by helping professionals connect to both resources and opportunities within their respective industries. And to that end, we've been very supportive in the transition of L&D during these crazy times and the transformation of that role by not only giving us in the industry better tools to network with, but we also ensure that we've got access to critical resources that can help people in the talent development industry keep current on trends, as well as find the right people when we need them. So that's one of the things that LinkedIn does to make a big impact in our community.
All right, Alexis, thank you so much, and looking forward to hearing much, much more from you. Moving on with our next introduction, we're going to go over to Caitlin, and our question for you, Caitlin, is, with work becoming increasingly global and virtual, what are the best ways for teams to be able to make and achieve their goals together?
I love that question. Hi, everyone. So excited to be here. My name is Caitlin. I am an organizational psychologist and a principal consultant for a company called BetterWorks. And this is a perfect question for a lot of stuff that I do as far as building performance enablement programs, is setting goal programs and really ensuring sustainability for those. So I would say a quick answer to that question is, I think the biggest important factors, no matter how you approach it, is creating like a micro macro culture for that group in transparency with their goals and enabling consistent communication and accountability for how people are accomplishing them. There's a lot of other factors that would go in there, but I think being able to create an environment of collaboration, and also if we're identifying our goals, like those are our most important things that we're saying we want to focus on. So we need to learn how to talk about them and learn how to negotiate resources behind that. So I think the short answer to my question would be like those main attributes.
Thank you very much, Caitlin, and welcome. And to round out our panel, we've got Greg. And Greg, for you, what's one of the top employee experience issues your clients are currently seeking your guidance on?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. I'm Greg Simpson. Most of you probably know me from my work with a New York City chapter, but my day job is that I'm managing director at Agent and Engagement, where we coach companies on developing and improving their employee experience. Well, this question is definitely right up my alley. And I think everybody can probably guess what it is. It's the whole return to work, return to the office dilemma that people are having right now. Do we stay remote? Do we go hybrid? Do we go in office only? I have a feeling, well, I have some very definite opinions on this. I'll leave those for a little bit later. I think hybrid is going to be the end of the way people are going to be going, but we have to give people a reason to want to return to the office, which I don't think a lot of companies are doing a good job of right now. They say they want employees to return so they can collaborate, but what I find is that the top leadership is not collaborating with their employees on that decision. So it's a very interesting dichotomy there. So looking forward to tonight's conversation.
Yes, for sure. Definitely looking forward to digging more into that, Greg. Want to hear all of your thoughts on that. Thank you all. Great to have this panel with us. And as Jen mentioned, we are approaching our questions thematically in line with the ATD capability model. And the first portion we're going to focus on is organization. And Ali, I believe, just for a refresher for everyone, you'll pop in a brief definition of what we're actually talking about when we're talking about these organizational capabilities. The first question for everyone on the panel is, what's the most exciting or impactful change that you've seen in your organization, or maybe the organization of your clients, depending on your role, over the past few years? Anyone really excited to take this away?
I'm happy to jump in.
All right, great, go for it, please.
So for me, I think the most exciting thing is that employees are actually starting to take charge of their careers and their own development. I think before that, they really relied on the company to kind of make those decisions for them, whether they stayed with the company or not. But I think now the fact that they kind of realize they have a lot more power, a lot more options than they did before, they're starting to get more involved in their own careers, which I think is a great thing.
I'll jump in on that. I think my answer is quite similar from Greg's, in that across the organizations that I work with, more specifically, I'll take that focus, is the leaning into how do we make our performance enablement program geared towards the benefit of employees and more growth focused, and moving away from more of a management style program, which is really interesting. It's more than just saying, how do we fit people into a box, but how do we define these boxes so people understand how to grow into them? And I think along those lines is moving away from like long, arduous annual review processes to say, how do we shorten this? How do we really define what performance means for our organization and make something that's usable, that people feel value from?
Yeah, I'm interested in Alexis's point of view, and also if we can stay here a little bit longer, because I, as a manager, also am really interested in how to best support the folks on my team in their growth, make it clear what their paths are, and make it clear where they are on that path. And it's not always easy. So, what are the things that are going to make it easier for folks like me?
Some of the things that are going to make it easier is with all of the changes that are happening, we're getting a lot more support from senior leadership. And if you're not, ask for it. Now is the time. And think about what it is you're going to do. What is the plan that you need to execute? What resources do you need to make that happen? And ask for those resources. Is it more people, more bodies? Is it a different type of training, a different type of learning? And then, of course, tying that in to the company's initiatives so that the results of your actions are going to benefit the organization, and making sure that the stakeholders see that connection. That is how you can get more support and then get more people engaged.
And David, to your question about from a manager standpoint, how do you do that? I think it's very difficult for, I think, most managers to figure out what the potential career paths are for their companies, because the companies don't lay those out very well. I think that's something that's going to be starting to change. People are going to have a better idea of what paths they can take, whether that's going laterally, going up, or actually stepping back into a different role so they can move laterally and move up in the company a different way. I think, there's a big emphasis on skills now, evaluating people's skills, so that'll put people more in a semi-level playing field to figure out how they compare to everybody else, and where they need to improve or add additional skills to their development.
And I think a lot of that too is a big focus and a need for soft skills. So even if there isn't roles for my direct reports to move into, but they're like, wanting to grow, what does tomorrow look like for me? I think it just makes good business sense, but putting their needs to a place, well, let's see how we can grow these certain soft skills. And even if they grow themselves out of a job, they'll likely stay longer than if there is no opportunity. It's scary to take that gamble to say, am I going to develop you so that you leave? But we see that people actually stay longer, and they might even create new job opportunities for themselves that might not have existed previously. And I think that when we look across even this might go into a different type of discussion, so I'll keep it short. But if we look from even like a development, if it is, you know, depending on the level and the responsibility for those jobs, if there isn't much like horizontal movement in that, like expanding more, or vertical, expanding more horizontally to say, how do you collaborate and connect with people in different areas? How do we think about this differently? Is a big shift into encouraging people to understand how their impact might improve, maybe in a different direction. I think the summation of that is just being creative about what value people would get out of where they're at. Easier said than done.
Okay, I think you brought up a great point, and that's that companies need to train people for the next level, regardless of whether that next level is available or not in that company.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they may have to leave the company to get extra experience, but you set them up for success. They're going to remember that. As you grow and expand in your company, there may be opportunities for them to come back in at a higher level later on. So you've got somebody that's coming back in the company that understands the culture, already has, you know, a good fit with there, and then can bring those new skills back into the company. So I think there's this whole thing. I think it's just like the old room. Like, if I train people, they'll leave, but if you don't train people, so I think you just always, and that's what people are looking for. People want to be developed. So I think that's a big focus that managers and leadership need to be considering right now.
Really appreciate being able to go a little bit more in depth on those ideas. And I'm also aware that, Alexis, you may have something else you want to share as your most exciting or impactful change. So back over to you to that original question.
The most exciting and impactful change that we've seen at LinkedIn is just in the most recent years, you know, so much was going on, and overnight people needed, you know, a new way to increase and showcase their transferable skills, and organizations, you know, quickly were able to manage new and existing needs by reaching out to people that they previously had not been able to via LinkedIn and our platform. So that's one of the things that was really exciting to be a part of. You know, for example, we worked closely within people in the healthcare industry during their time of need to help them quickly staff up and specific areas of the country when they needed them to do that. So, and at LinkedIn, we didn't even charge them to do that. We just volunteered and helped to them to fulfill the needs that they had open in their organization. So one of the things that's amazing about LinkedIn is that we're just really, really nimble. And it was exciting to see how quickly we were able to shift our tools, our internal tools and resources in order to be able to support hybrid work and the focus on well-being in the last few years.
Wow, yeah, talk about really important things over the last couple of years. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for adding your thoughts to that question. We've got one more question within the organizational category, and then Ali, I'll check in with you to see what's happening in the chat and if there's anything else that would be interesting to take a closer look at. Next question. In response to the Great Resignation, attraction, upgrade, all these different things we're calling it, what should talent development professionals be thinking about in terms of employee engagement, employee experience? And let's start with this one off with Greg again, since I know this is your bread and butter.
Yeah, it is. So I don't like the word Great Resignation. I call it the employee enlightenment. Again, I'd look at it from an employee standpoint rather than the resignation is a bad term from a company standpoint. I look at it as a good thing from an employee standpoint, because people are moving into jobs that they love, which is going to make them more engaged and help their customers. There's the whole cycle around that. I think the two things that I think of when I think of how do we respond to all this, and that's individualization. How do we segment our employees in ways that are meaningful to them instead of a one-size-fits-all approach? And the other is giving people choice. There may be some things that are just set in stone, but there are ways to give people choice around that at the same time. So I think individualization and choice are the two big things that I would come away from that with.
Caitlin, anything to add there?
Yeah, I love that, Greg. I hadn't heard that before, but I'm going to start using that. I love that. I think my thoughts on this are kind of following a similar theme, and as what Alexis and Greg have said. And I think that there is a way for us to look at, well, one, I think like flexible working, like how do we meet people where they're at instead of asking people to meet us where we want them to be. There's organizations right now that are mandating their employees to go back, and some have chosen to go remote first. And I think those create two totally different experiences on how we focus on development of our people, how we enable managers to manage our people for the long term, and what does that really mean for their overall well-being. So I think being able to pivot and make adjustments as needed to be able to drive that in different circumstances, one is important. But also learning how, I think from a soft skill perspective, it's how do we enable more empathy across the board, even from an organizational perspective, so we're making decisions in the best interest of our employees. I might have gone on a tangent. I hope that answers the question.
All tangents welcome. And
okay.
Yeah, curious for either of you, or even, and also, of course, Alexis, in terms of figuring out ways to give more flexibility to employees or making things more individualized, what are some good ways to do that? What have you seen that's working?
Oh, sorry, Greg, were you about to?
No, I'm thinking. So
okay.
I don't know how it's working right now. That's my thing. So
I think we're all figuring it out, and we're going to have to. I mean, my thought is if we put the other person first and think about what are their needs and where do they work best, if that doesn't work, there's going to be like retail in certain industries and certain organizations where it's not going to work across the board. I fully recognize that. But I think that there's allowances that we need to make, even from a flexibility standpoint, on is how do we support them when they have to go home and take care of a family member or pick up their kids. I think that when the pandemic started, there was a number of podcasts and different seminars I did. And my hope at the beginning, even though that's a rough thing to say, is I hope that this is an opportunity that allows us to think about other people and be more empathetic about situations as we're making decisions. And as we start to look at going back to the office, like I'm really hoping that we don't lose that perspective that we had a few years ago, even though it was hard. I really think that from an individualized standpoint, as we're managing people, they all have their own circumstances. And I think that we need to be able to trust people to be able to make those decisions. We hire them to be good at their jobs, and we should put trust first instead of assuming distrust.
Caitlin, I would add, David, to your question, what you can do is ask individually. We're trying to come up with a general way to handle and manage everyone as far as flexibility. So, okay, what does flexibility mean? We as a company have decided flexibility means 4 days a week, and that's what we're going with. We have to embrace the idea of flexibility, meaning as leadership, management, and encouraging others in our community to ask each individual that reports to you, what does flexibility mean to them? What is important to them? Because for one person, it could be they want to work from 12 to 8 instead of 9 to 5. Another person would be, I can do 4 hours in the morning, and then I have to take care of my kids. And then I'm going to tell you, I'm going to get back online at 7 o'clock at night until 10 o'clock instead of watching TV. And I'm going to, get the work done, work on the presentation, work on the project, send some emails out, delay delivery. But that's when it works best for me. So I think really grasping the definition of flexibility will help us work better with our teams as they go back into hybrid. Of course, it could be 2 days a week, 1 day a week. It's going to be different for each person.
I think this is one of the most exciting times to be in talent development and be in management in leadership roles right now, because we kind of get to reinvent the world of work. It's not going to go back to the way it was. And I think the problem right now is there are a lot of people out there that are just scared because they don't know what's happening in the future. They just want to revert to the old ways. And that's where that whole trust issue comes in. Like Caitlin said, that they're just dictating, and there's no trust when you dictate. You have to have people involved in that conversation. So I think it's a really, really cool time, and I hope we take advantage of it.
Yeah, thank you for that inspiration, Greg, and thank you for those thoughts, Caitlin and Alexis. I'm going to pass over to Ali to capture some of the things that have been going on in chat and update us there.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So there's been some good dialogue about companies that have shifted to being remote first or went permanently remote after all of this happened. And so the question and the dialogue has been more around like, how do you scale learning and specifically onboarding and more longitudinal learning for some of those companies that have made that shift, and some folks who have sort of gone on to do new things and try out new roles in companies. And so curious if anyone has some perspective to share about how they've shifted their learning modalities or what that's looked like internally.
I'll be happy to say what we've done. I think my company I work for has decided to, we've opened our offices and we decided to be remote first, but it's up to the individual, you know, when it's safe in the area on what they would like to do. And we've gone through several phases of mass hiring, growing quite quickly. And I think that given the culture of our organization, we've had to really be mindful to lean into connectivity, because that's one of the biggest parts of our culture, is how interconnected everyone is, especially if so many people aren't at the office today. And what does that look like over Zoom? And are we creating Zoom fatigue or not? And what does that mean? And so we use, like, a big thing that we use is Slack and different tools, including Zoom and stuff, but making sure that there's, from a leadership perspective, that we're setting a tone for casual conversations and role modeling how meetings are started sometimes. You know, I'm all for the quick 30 minutes, but I'm also for a moment to have a kumbaya at the beginning of a meeting, just to see how people are feeling and to set a different tone. And so I think emphasizing the impact of communication during onboarding so people can understand that sentiment, instead of having them just take different Zoom webinars or, you know, different type of online courses, making it more personal, I think, or at least I hope, has made a bigger impact.
I would say one of the things that we do, especially around onboarding or someone who even just, you know, joins from a different department, is setting them up for success by making sure that they've got a onboarding buddy or two. It used to be just one, but now really two. And then also encouraging that they speak to someone who's not even on the team, so they can get to know the culture and other things that are going on in the organization. So they're going to take the training and the videos and all of that stuff on the computer, but making sure that they've got a comfortable place to go to ask those quick questions, because the things that we would just pop up in a cubicle and say, hey, how do I do this? Where do I do this? When they've got that person to go to, and we introduce them as that person. When you've got that question, wait, where do I find this? What's a quick question? And they know, well, I can count on these particular people. It just it starts out small like that. And then of course we do the group activities where there's time to relax and get to know each other. In my team meetings, I do it as a 2-minute meditation to start the meeting off. I've just from a website, or one time my phone didn't work. I just went on YouTube, grabbed a 2-minute meditation, and it was a great way to just kind of start the meeting and let everyone get settled in. So those are some of the things that can really help.
I like that a lot. I think one of the things that Alexis said that was really important is, you know, onboarding, we tend to focus on your immediate role and what you're supposed to do and the people that you on your team. But you need to expand that and everybody that you're going to potentially interact with, because when you're in a virtual environment or remote environment, you don't know those people. You need to develop those relationships as well. So make those warm introductions, help them understand how they both impact each other. Like, if you don't do this, then this is how it affects this person. And this is, you know, this is what their role is to help us. I think it's very important. And again, helps the connected part, keeps it broader than just your team. You're dealing with people throughout the company at that point.
Thank you. Yes, good ways of creating community, even if we just all happen to be at our own individual screens every day. Thank you all. Yes, we're going to move now into the professional component of the capability model. And before we go into our question, or sorry, the personal portion, before we move into the question, we're going to do a quick poll just to see what everyone's thinking about. So, Ali, whenever you're ready. So yes, what is the biggest personal development opportunity for the members of your organization? When you think about everybody, what do you think everyone would most benefit from? And I'm seeing the answers coming in fast and furious. We've got about 70% of folks responding. We'll give it a few more seconds before we have Allie end the poll and share answers. We've got 28. Yeah, I bet a lot of us are the co-hosts who aren't answering. So I think we're at a pretty good percentage now, Allie, if you want to share the results. And it seems like the mix leads, obviously, because that's, you know, we're thinking about so many things, but then leadership development is the next highest. Before we actually move into the question, anyone on the panel want to comment on what you're seeing here in terms of these percentages? I'm noticing that reskilling is 0%, and that's actually what my company is doubling down on. So very interested in what the thoughts are from the panel here.
My first thought is around leadership development. That bothers me because that tends to be like we're selecting certain people to develop and not making it open to everybody in the company. I'm much more of a self-select person than a determine who's a higher potential or whatever. But I would consider that more management development rather than leadership development would be most important. That's just me.
What I notice is that those responses that we gathered here today are absolutely consistent with what we have gathered at LinkedIn. I don't know if you've heard of the Workplace Learning Report, the one for 2022. We asked a similar question to over 1,400 L&D professionals globally and 600 learners. And we've got the same statistics. Number one is leadership and management training. We put them together. And number two is upskilling employees. Number three was digital transformation and more upskilling. So very interesting that right here in our group, it matched exactly statistically what we had from our Workplace Learning Report.
Good, yeah, good validation for the data that you've already collected. Well, appreciate everyone weighing in on that, and let's move into our question for this category, and this will be open to everyone on the panel. What skills are in demand right now? Which are those that we might have a blind spot to that we should be focused on? I think these are probably the ones that might be in demand tomorrow or very soon after. And then how are you seeing organizations responding to these needs?
I can start. And I wanted to comment that we also have renamed the term the Great Resignation. At LinkedIn, we refer to the Great Resignation as the Great Reshuffle, and we speak about it frequently. We found that LinkedIn members' skills for the same occupation have changed by about 25% between 2015 and 2021. And actually, in an article by one of our LinkedIn bloggers, Rachel Parnas, she discusses how the biggest key to landing the job you want nowadays is with skills. And employers recognize that skills are transferable. You can think of them as durable. So I would say that the people skills include things like currently that are really in demand are strong leadership skills, effective listening, conflict management and resolution, of course, resourcefulness, and critical thinking are some of the soft skills that are in demand. And the hard skills, of course, have remained very important as we continue in this hybrid environment. And right now we're seeing skills that are needed in areas like, I'm sure this is familiar to some of you, software engineering, IT administration, project management, especially with all this collaboration across different locations. We need someone who can really help keep people on task. Marketing, and believe it or not, what else showed it up high in our statistic was learning and development. Did you guys know that the demand for L&D specialists has increased at least 94% in third quarter of last year as compared to second quarter last year? Isn't that interesting?
Very interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I like those, Alexis. Those are really interesting. I think the two that I would add to that from a soft skill standpoint are empathy and compassion, especially from frontline managers. To most employees, the managers are the company. And so if you don't have a good relationship there and there's not trust built there, then you're not going to have a very successful team or division or company in the end. But I think those are two of the big ones. And that's, again, trying to get the right people in the right role. Gallup says that 1 in 10 managers is in the right role. 2 or 3 with some training can be very effective. And the other 7 should never have been put into those roles whatsoever. And so that goes back to, just because somebody's a good individual performer doesn't mean they need to go into the management role. There's a whole different criteria for managing people versus an individual contributor. And I think that goes back to the career paths and things like that, is that companies really need to look at alternative career paths to management. How do we have subject matter expert roles, or SME, some kind of thing like that people can move into, so they can continue to move up the company without having to take on a role that they don't like and that they'll literally probably fail at some point if they're not good with those skills. Okay. And again, that's why empathy and compassion, I think, are two really important ones to go.
Before we hear from Caitlin, I just want to add that this is a great opportunity for all the participants to go ahead and pop into the chat any of those in-demand skills that you're seeing in your organization as well. We, of course, want to hear what's happening for all of you too. So feel free to pop some of those in chat. And then, yeah, Caitlin, definitely want to hear from you too.
Thanks. I could not agree more with both of these. And Alexis, thank you for sharing that article. I can't wait to read it. That is so cool. I love hearing that. So for a lack of copying exactly what Greg said, I'll add on to that. And I think there, in what I see across so I work with across many different vertical markets with different organizations and building their talent and performance programs. And the biggest theme that I see come out of across those organizations is definitely the need for soft skills, but more specifically on what does that look like from a leadership perspective, and what does that look like from a management perspective? How do we teach our managers to be better managers? To me, I think to all of us, those are very different concepts, leadership versus management. And to me, you do not need to be a senior level person in order to develop really strong leadership skills. I absolutely believe in leading from the bottom up even. You can be a leader in your role and make an effective impact no matter where you are within the organization. It just depends on what you are gravitating towards, more or less. Not everyone needs to be a manager, and that's okay. It's not in all of our purview, but all of us can be different types of leaders within our organization. So it's an interesting concept in that how consistent it seems to be across many organizations on their aptitude for looking at senior people in leadership only, not looking for the rest of the organization. We're really focusing on how to be a good manager. I think that those are very different concepts to make sure that are equally addressed.
I agree. I need to give credit because Caitlin was the first one that brought up empathy, and that just put it on my radar again. But I think the other thing that she just said was really true as well, is that, and it kind of goes back to the manager role, and that anybody can be a leader. What I normally find is when you have a manager that's in a role that they're not effective in, whether basically a bad manager, not through their own fault or their own, just because of the company put them there. If you look around, there's somebody on that team that's serving as the leader for that thing, and that's the person that needs to be promoted to management. But people just don't look for that. So that's just an interesting observation that I found over the years.
So true.
With this collection of soft skills and human skills, hard skills, what are the ways organizations are responding? How are they looking to make sure that these skills are in place for all of these employees? Is it an in-house solution? Is it LinkedIn Learning? Is it finding the right vendor or some other sort of solution? Anything that you're seeing in terms of keeping up with all these important skills?
That is a really good question. That is, so to me, in my perspective, soft skills are something that takes muscle memory and time and encouragement and reinforcement. And I think that there's a lot that goes into that. I think that if your manager doesn't care about it or pays attention to it, it's not going to be something that's easily learned or adapted by most people. If leadership doesn't care about it or adapt to it, like I think the development of soft skills is something that needs to be role modeled and encouraged and starts from the top down. Because we need to be, in order for me to learn a new behavior, in order for me to grow in some certain area, like I need to be able to see it in action and learn from my mistakes and get feedback on how to correct and be mindful of what that looks like. And a lot of that's creating neuroplasticity, and we need to be able to create space for that to happen. So my thought on it at the moment is such a good question, is I think it requires a combination of a lot of different avenues to be able to support it effectively, which is like understanding what it means, but it's doing it wrong and getting feedback, indirect and directly, whatever that looks like, and getting a chance to practice to be able to build that new muscle to do it again. And I think a lot of that is in day-to-day, you're showing up to work every day and being given stretch assignments or opportunities to be able to start to develop that. But if there's a course on LinkedIn Learning, I'd love to know.
There is, but what I was going to say is exactly to what you spoke to, Caitlin, is that it is, sure, you can watch a course, but it's got to be encouraged and followed up with, especially in the soft skills, by leadership. It's something that you can coach to and coach from. So if someone watches a video and then your next one-on-one, how did it go? What are your 2 top takeaways from that video? How would you implement that in your day-to-day activities going forward? Give me an example. Let's practice. So it blended learning, but also it still comes back to that 20-10-70 as well. Mm-hmm. You're going to take some of the course and then you're going to practice it and then you're going to experience it out. The idea is, as you're experiencing it when you're working with others, do you come back and have the conversation about how you improved your listening skills, how you improved your conflict management or collaboration?
Mm-hmm.
I was
just going to say that's another good way of, moving from manager to coach, and you have that person there that's there to help you improve those skills and give you feedback and bounce ideas off of things like that. So yeah, sorry.
I love that. No, I apologize. I jumped in over you. I think another part of that too, which requires, more learning as well as hands-on, but really understanding concepts, is how do we lead and manage people through a lens of neurodiversity. Like we've said the word empathy quite a bit. I've said it. I think organizations from a cultural standpoint, yes, can be empathetic. It is hard for some people to get that concept and to really show it. And that's okay. And that applies to all different people. How do we approach that in developing those skills? And I know I'm asking a lot of questions at the moment, but I'll get to an answer. In people that struggle or have different ways of communicating, when our brains work differently and we think differently, like we can't approach these things through a lens of ourselves to say, this is how I do it. This is how I understand it. Therefore, this is how other people would react and respond. I think we need to broaden, and this is where I see the future of work going, at least I'm making the case for it and really trying to, is developing programs and enabling our performance programs and how our managers know how to manage and our leaders know how to lead, taking into consideration the differences and the diversity that we have, not just physically, not just where we're from and geography wise, but also how our brains process information.
It gets back to the individualization I talked about earlier.
Yep.
I think, and interesting, I don't know where this came from. I either heard it on a podcast or read an article, but they took a group of autistic individuals that were in management, and evidently autistic people have, the empathy doesn't come naturally to people with autism. And so they actually gave them prescriptions of, this is what you do, this is how you do it. And they did it, and they got a good reaction from the people they were managing. And that reaction made them want to do it even more. So it actually fed and helped develop that, even though it didn't come completely naturally to them. So I just think there's really interesting ways, like you were saying, around neuroplasticity and neural, different ways to look at people and not think of everybody as the same, and processing things the same way. Yeah.
I like that we're closing a loop on all of these questions.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. We keep bringing it back to some of the same themes, and there's a lot of nice alignment among the panel. And this was, yeah, this was a great conversation here. Before we move into the next section, Allie, over to you. Anything from the chat of note before we move on?
There was some discussion around sort of hiring and retention in this new environment that we're in a hybrid environment, and talking about the great shuffle, I think, to use a term that Alexa mentioned. And so just any thoughts from the panelists on retention during this time. And someone also asked a question, which I think might be connected, around using stay interviews. Paul asked about that. I'm not sure if Paul wants to expand on that at all, but I think probably the questions are connected in terms of retention.
Very much so. I mean, I think, it's the frontline manager's responsibility for that retention. Again, they're the face of the company, so the relationship that they have with their employees is going to play a big role in that retention. There's got to be trust there that the manager's not hiding stuff or keeping things from people. And the more you can build that trust, the more people will be able to ask the questions that they're really wanting to know, rather than trying to backdoor and figure out what they need to do. So if you can get to a point where your employee actually tells you, I'm thinking about leaving, that's the best thing you can possibly do, because you have a chance to save them. Otherwise, they're out the door and you don't have any chance whatsoever. So I think that's big. Stay interviews, of course, are huge around that. Instead of just, why did people leave? Why are people staying? What are we doing well that we need to replicate across the organization? And there may be some other stuff that I've forgotten. Sorry.
Another thing that we do is we're constantly having career conversations with our employees. It's not once a year or even once every 6 months. It's pretty much once a month. What are you doing to grow and learn, either in your area or with a growth mindset, maybe outside of your area of expertise, but a stretch assignment or something along those lines. And even if the employee doesn't want to move up into management, because that's the hardest part, is when you've got a great employee who does very well and they don't want to be a manager, they want to remain an individual contributor and still contribute to the organization. If we don't show them ways and opportunities for them to stay with the organization, that's another thing that can make someone move on. Just because, I mean, we just get tired. Some people just get tired of doing the same thing. 3 years is their limit. 4 years is their limit. 7 years might be their limit. But whatever it is, if we're having that conversation of where can you go next in our organization? Who are you talking to? We encourage it. You should talk to the product team. You should talk to the marketing team. You should talk to the finance team, whichever team you're interested in, and just get to know what they do, how they do it, what an opportunity might look like for you 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 18 months from now. That has been really effective because people they're working towards something that is their choice and they don't feel stuck.
And it benefits the company at the same time. So it's a
Absolutely.
win for everybody. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that sparks something, just to add that. So at my company, we really embrace that, and last year implemented, which I've seen work really well at other organizations, like a mentoring program to give the opportunity for people, and it shuffles every 6 months for people to become a mentor or something, or become a mentee in something. And I think that when we, from a management perspective, notice that people are getting a little stagnant, and I'm like, I don't know, if there's not room for them to grow, then we really reinforce more of a horizontal perspective. So I've had conversations with people in other departments, and I'm like, oh, I've got this team I'm running over here. We've got this. You might not want to come on my department necessarily, but what about this project that we're working on? Would that be something that interests you? So I think we really try to focus on, like, are there other areas within the organization that gives an opportunity for people to learn more about something that they might not have had an opportunity to explore otherwise. And I love that.
I love that. Yep. Because it's not a huge commitment. You might want to try this department and you find out, oh, I don't want to do that project anymore. And you're not committed to that. You just got your time and say, okay, now I'm going to move on to something else. So it gives that flexibility, which I think is great.
And I would say, once again, this hits our theme of thinking about things through the individual. Where do they want to go? What do they need? What's keeping them in an organization? So glad we're so tightly on theme. And let's move on to the professional segment of the ATD capability model. When we talk about this, we're talking about the skills that talent development professionals should possess. Allie is going to run a poll, and it's going to look eerily familiar. It's going to look exactly the same, except it's more focused now on you as talent development professionals. So what's your personal biggest development opportunity as a talent development professional? Let's see how these match up with the scores for the organization or for each personal individual at the organization. And we've got about half of the folks answering so far. Thank you for your quick answers. We're going to keep this open for just a few more seconds. So if you did want to become part of our statistics here, definitely click your choice so that we can represent you when we end the poll and share it. And it looks like the responses have slowed to a halt. So Allie, I think you can go ahead and share those results with us.
David, is it okay if I jump in really quick? Because now looking at this one, I'm really curious to know why your company is investing so much in reskilling.
Well, we're doubling down on it for the purpose of the clients that we serve. So we're looking at some of these key skills, some of which Alexis mentioned in terms of software engineering, product management, digital marketing, and we're looking to partner with organizations who have all these open roles and say, hey, maybe the job market is tough for these things, but if you'd like, we can take employees from your organization or even from the community who are underrepresented in tech, and we can put them through this program where they'll learn, they'll do projects, and they'll be able to enter one of these junior level positions and fill the role that way. So that's what we're looking to do. Yeah, thanks for asking. It looks to me like we've got a mix always wins because that captures a lot of categories. But in this case, we've got coaching as our number one, then upskilling is number two. So any further thoughts here? Any reactions? Brief, because we've got a whole other set of questions left, but anything you want to note about this compared to the first question?
I think it's interesting from a coaching standpoint. To me, that more says we're coming out of this where we're used to being together all the time, we're remote all the time. So to me, it's more of a how do we better relate with each other and help people develop themselves at the same time, getting what we need to out of that relationship. So it's more of a relation. To me, it's more of a relationship type issue than just coaching somebody on how to do something. I think it's bigger than coaching. Maybe is what I'm trying to say. I think it's interesting though.
Great. Yeah, appreciate that, Greg. I'm going to, for the sake of time, we've got at least a good 5 or so minutes before we head into our rapid fire wrap up, which would be pretty fun and interesting for all of us. These questions are kind of intertwined, so I'm just going to pose them all and then let the conversation happen as it may. How are talent development professionals keeping their skills sharp and fresh? And what are your own personal talent development hacks? Your favorite engagement tool, icebreaker, Zoom tech tip, performance management approach. Just gonna open that all up for our edification as talent development professionals.
So I'm going to ask the question, do we practice what we preach? Which I find that we don't. We're busy developing everybody else, but you don't take the time to develop yourself. So I think that's something very important for each of us to consider. From my standpoint, I do a lot of reading. I only read nonfiction books. If I'm going to read, I want to learn something. So that, a lot of articles, Wired, Fast Company, Harvard Business Review, Gallup. There's a lot of really cool information out there on how to be better at talent development and kind of, what's coming up in the future, what we're going to be thinking of now. There are all kinds of courses, classes. We have LinkedIn Learning, which, is a huge resource right there. If you're in the New York City area and you have a New York Public Library card, you actually can get access to LinkedIn Learning for free through the website. So kind of no excuse not to be taking advantage of some of these options there. Last year, I don't know how many people took advantage of the University of South Florida's DEI in the Workplace certificate. That blew up like crazy. Over 10,000 people took that course for free. Again, upskilling on DEI, which is pretty cool. And then I think in general, you know, not only through classes or reading, things like that, it's really the interactions we have with each other. We need to develop those connections, which again, LinkedIn is very helpful for doing, to getting us connected. We have to build a relationship after that, but it helps us connect and learn about people. And then of course, through organizations like ATD and our local chapters as well, where people like-minded come together and share what they've learned and what their issues are.
I think Greg covered it all. Plus one. Oh, I'm going to say that for later. But you guys know what I mean.
That's so funny.
I think there's just a lot out there that we need to take advantage of. So,
there is.
Yeah. Sorry, Caitlin.
Yeah,
I keep doing that to you.
No, we're doing it to each other. It's okay. I enjoy it. I think that to me comes back to a concept of like just being curious and wanting to advance, like an opportunity to learn more. I think curiosity leads to learning and answering some questions about that. So, you know, different, I think it's just trying things new and seeing if they're failing. And I think a lot of it is how to have a connection with people. Though, you know, how I teach or mentor people that are trying to implement some of these new talent development skills. And like the very first thing you have to do is people can read your energy, and even more so over Zoom. The last thing we want is to be like Ferris Bueller's teacher. I forget the name, but
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? Like it needs to come across as genuine and heartfelt and in whatever avenue that looks like. And it really comes down to creating an atmosphere where people feel like they can be themselves and whatever it is that we're doing, I think is so important. But learning how to do that differently or trying new things. I got to say, my company uses Slack, and I love a Slack Huddle, and I'll use that for a lot of different things sometimes. If any of you guys do too, it's my favorite add-on. But I think just learning is a big thing. I listen to a lot of podcasts and read a lot of articles myself.
I think we need to make the habit, David, to make time for ourselves to partake in these activities that we already know are right here in front of us. We're all clearly members of ATD. Are we reading the magazines? Are we really making time? Do we block out our calendar to read these articles? That just leaving the time can make a big difference, because you'll be able to absorb it and take advantage of what's right here at our fingertips.
It is a little bit, we say this often, the whole shoemaker's children phenomenon, where we're so focused on other people's development that sometimes we lose track of our own. So it's a really good thing to keep in mind. We can be more helpful to others than if we are able to help ourselves a little bit too. Caitlin, just out of curiosity, maybe some other folks who aren't familiar with a Slack Huddle would be interested in. Could you tell us just a little bit about what that looks like before we move on to our rapid fire wrap up?
I would be happy to. It's my favorite. So of Slack, recently, I've lost track of time lately, so it might not be that recently, added a new feature where when you're chatting with someone, you can push a button to just talk to them. And the reason why I like that over using Zoom or anything is it feels less formal. It virtually feels like you're rolling over to somebody else's desk or walking by and saying, hey, what's up? Because it can be really quick, really easy. And you don't have to leave like the platform that you're in to do something else. You can share your screen and do stuff, but I just like that. It's just more of a casual chat than a formal meeting.
And since Josh has a quick follow-up question, is that a paid option, or does that come with any free version of Slack?
I don't know, but I think it's free. I think it's probably one of their enhancements that they did, but I don't know that for 100% sure.
Cool. So
we do the same thing. We do the same thing through Teams chat. You can push the button and then just start talking to the person you're typing, and then push the button and then just say, hey, quick question, 5 minutes, and then you're done.
Yeah, that spontaneity is nice. It's harder to make that happen when we're all at home. And so those are nice ways to do it. We've got a couple more portions of our evening. We've got a 7:15 end time. We've got a good amount of time to wrap up. We're going to do some just fun rapid fire questions for the panel. I'll ask, and then just to keep it moving, I'll just keep calling out folks' names for when it's your turn to answer. And these are just meant to be like 1 to 5 word answers, just to keep it moving. And to include everybody else, when you hear my question, feel free to pop that into the chat. Let's just go wild and hear from everybody as well. So I've got 5 of these questions. It won't take very long because we're going to move through them quickly. The first one is the corporate or pandemic buzzword you never want to hear again. Alexis.
+1, because now it's like inside in my head. And I think if you want to agree with someone, can't you just say, I agree? But no, +1 comes out.
Greg.
Pre-pandemic. It's over. Let's move forward. Let's move forward. We're in the present, not the past.
Caitlin.
Oh my gosh, those are way better than the ones I thought of. I was thinking from a performance, like, here's our long list of competencies that we need to measure.
Yeah.
All right, next up, what is, and we somewhat already covered this already, but just to settle on one, what's your favorite thing to read or listen to? Greg.
So we've already talked about my love of nonfiction books, but the other thing I absolutely love and obsess on is EDM, electronic dance music.
Wow. Caitlin.
Podcasts. If I'm randomly not in a meeting, I'll put one on. And the one I'm listening to now, I'll put it in the chat. It just escaped me, but you can go by. It's honestly, it's so good, but fair warning, some of them are a little bit sad, but I'll put it in.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we'd love to know. And Alexis.
I love to read detective mystery movies, but detective mystery books, but only when there's a female hero who's in charge. She's the sheriff or she's solving crimes, any of those. They're also all over the Hallmark Channel, but I like the books better.
And yeah, we need more and more of those kind of heroes. Biggest work wardrobe change. Caitlin.
Pants. Not that they're optional.
Alexis.
Warm socks. Because it's just, I'm comfortable in the place, but my feet are always cold because I never wear shoes.
Greg.
So moving from the third hole from the end to the second hole from the end on my belt.
All right. The topic we should have talked about tonight, but we didn't get to. Alexis.
With all the changes and movement, how are you currently positioning L&D within your organization? Is it time for you to have a discussion with your leader?
Caitlin.
That was a really good one, Alexis. Yeah. I'm not thinking of one fast enough.
I'll come back. I don't have one either. I don't have one either.
Oh no!
Well,
because we talked about everything.
More about what tools we could actually use potentially to help people connect and things like that. We've talked about Teams and Huddle and things like that, but I think there's some other tools out there we might be able to pull in at some point.
I thought of something I will say, and this is probably from a time constraint, which is fine, is we've talked a lot about some theories and some what to do's in certain circumstances, but I think it would be great to dig more into the how to's and the nuances on actually how to implement some of these things that we've talked about.
Cool. Yeah. And maybe that's inspiration for future regional webinars or chapter webinars. So hopefully we'll catalog all of these things that came out of this conversation and funnel those into other programming. Finally, if you could look into a crystal ball and predict the next big thing in talent development, what is it? Greg.
Personal virtual assistants. I think we're all going to have Alexis either on our computer or phone or whatever, and that's going to be the thing that helps us develop. It can listen to what we say, how we say things, give us feedback, coach us, remind us of different things. So I just think it's going to be kind of that one-stop shop that's going to help everybody develop individually. And of course, with AI, that'll help tailor it to your needs. So if anybody's, I'm a big Disney fan as well. Everybody, if New York City knows that, I'm not sure everybody else does. But there's a movie called Ron's Gone Wrong, and it's about this it's very Apple-like, but it's a personal digital assistant that goes with you, although it's kind of a robot. And it just really kind of opened my eyes of the potential that kind of thing would offer everybody. And it's coming. There are already some like LeadX, Kevin Cruz, who's an employee engagement expert. He has a company called LeadX, and they've developed a bot called Amanda, which is very similar to Alexa, but it's only about performance management and making yourself better as a manager. So giving you feedback and things like that. So it's already there. I think it's going to become more ubiquitous in the workplace.
All right, Alexis.
Virtual reality training. I think that's coming in the future.
Caitlin.
I love all that. I agree with all of that. The thing I'm going to hone on, and probably because my heart's in this, is linking how do we understand performance and neurodiversity? It's a huge segment of our population across the world, and I think there's tremendous value in that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that, Caitlin. My previous role was with a program for folks who had some kind of learning differences and were getting ready to enter the workforce. So I can certainly connect to that one. Nice. That was exciting. Thank you for all those answers, panel. And with the few minutes we've got left, I think I'm going to hand it back over to Jen for a little bit of a wrap up and closing.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh my God, this has been, I've wanted to speak the whole time, but I didn't want to.
You've been very active in the chat.
Yeah. So that's where my voice was coming out there. Thank you. We want your feedback. This is for you, right? We're doing this for you. So we want to make sure you're getting value. We typically have a survey, but in this case, we'd love for you to email contact@atdnyc.org and tell us what you liked, what you want to see more of. Maybe we do this again towards the end of the year, right? Times move very quickly nowadays. So I also see in chat, it's moving very fast, but there's another upcoming, there's a regional webinar every month. So Paul put next month's regional webinar is all in the leader's role in supporting mental wellness. So check out that. And I think just thank you. I got a lot out of it. So I hope that everybody else did.
So Jen, I've had a great time, and thanks to Alexis and Caitlin and David, thank you very much for your moderation, and Ali on the back end. I think I just want to make one last pitch here for our chapter, and I'm assuming this goes for all the chapters that are on the call, the other 5 regional chapters. Your chapter is a place where you can develop your skills. There are plenty of volunteer opportunities. We welcome anybody that has an idea. We'll find a way to make it work. So take advantage of that. Again, like we've talked about before, take control of your own development.
Yes, ATDNYC for one is looking always open to volunteers. If you want to try something out, learn new skills, it's a very safe space to do that. So we welcome and encourage it. And hopefully you all know about Membership Week, lots of discounts on certificates, books, anything that you might want on the td.org website. And if you need to renew your membership or join, now's the time, because there's a discount this week. So that's my plug. Thank you so much, Alexis, Greg, Caitlin, David, Ali, and all of you who turned out in your dinner time for this. I hope you found value.
This was a lot of fun. Thank you everyone for listening to us.
Thanks.
Yes. Thanks for having us, and thanks to those of you who joined. Really appreciate it.
Yes. Many thanks to our panel. Thank you so much for your time and insights, and really appreciate all the contributions and participation from everyone who joined. Looking forward to seeing you at the next event, and have a good rest of your day, everyone.